A man in Siberia signs a contract that will likely kill him. He already knows the odds. He signs anyway because the number on that page is more money than his family has ever seen. This is not a story about patriotism. It is a story about a spreadsheet, because somewhere inside the Kremlin, someone ran the numbers and realized Russia's greatest weapon in this war was never its tanks. It was its poverty. This gap between the glittering capital and the forgotten East is not just a curiosity for travel documentaries. It is, quietly, one of the most important resources fueling the war in Ukraine. And today, we are going to walk through exactly how that works, because the mechanism is far stranger and more calculated than most people realize. Let us start with the bigger question first, because it matters. Does inequality cause war in the first place? The intuitive answer feels obvious. Unequal societies breed resentment. Resentment breeds conflict. Poor nations lash out at rich ones. Poor classes rise up against wealthy ones, and war follows naturally from the gap. Except that is not really what decades of research show. Search through the data connecting inequality to conflict, and you find a mess of contradictory results. Some studies find a link. Most do not find one that holds up once you zoom out. And once you understand why, the whole picture becomes far more interesting. Grievances alone do not start wars. Grievances are everywhere, in every country, in every era. What actually separates peace from war is something colder, a breakdown in bargaining. War is expensive and destructive for everyone involved, which means that whenever a cheaper alternative exists, the powerful side has every incentive to offer a concession instead of pulling a trigger. Inequality creates a reason to fight. It rarely creates the conditions that make fighting the only option. So no, inequality does not reliably cause wars to begin. But here is the twist. Once a war is already happening, inequality can completely reshape how that war gets fought. And nowhere is that more visible right now than inside Russia. Russian inequality operates on two levels. At the top, a small circle of oligarchs has fused itself with the political establishment, controlling both the money and the levers of power. Below that sits a second, quieter form of inequality: geography. Moscow, St. Petersburg, and a few major hubs absorb almost all economic opportunities in the country. Everywhere else, especially the further east you travel, poverty sits directly on top of some of the most valuable energy reserves on the planet. These regions have little political voice, and for decades, nobody in the Kremlin had much reason to fix that. Then came the war, and sometime around 2023, Moscow figured out exactly how to turn that neglected geography into an asset. Here is the logic, stripped down to numbers. Before the war, the average monthly salary across Russia sat around $600. In a country with no inequality, recruiting a soldier would mean offering that average wage plus a premium for the danger involved. But Russia is nowhere close to equal, which means the Kremlin never had to negotiate from that average at all. It could reach straight down to the poorest end of the wage scale and build its army entirely out of that. In the impoverished stretches of Siberia and Central Asia, what looks like a poverty wage to anyone in the West looks like a fortune to someone with almost nothing. Enough money to change a family's life for years, sometimes even if the soldier never comes home. That single fact is the entire engine behind Russia's ability to sustain this war. Compare that to the United States. Try to imagine Washington asking ordinary Americans to sign up for a war of this scale under similar terms. It would collapse immediately because America simply does not have a deep enough pool of desperate poverty to draw from. The only way to fill the ranks would be enormous salaries, and enormous salaries make large wars politically radioactive. Notice this does not mean inequality decides whether wars happen at all. The United States never invaded Iran, not because of some moral restraint, but because the manpower costs made it politically impossible. Inequality does not switch war on or off. It decides what a country can afford to attempt and at what price. There is one more wrinkle here, and it is a problem for the Kremlin, not a solution. Soldiers pulled from the poorest, most disillusioned regions tend to be the least ideologically committed. They are not fighting for Moscow's ambitions. They are fighting for the paycheck. That works fine when officers can enforce discipline in tight formations. But modern warfare has changed that equation. Drone surveillance now leaves infantry isolated for hours at a time, far from direct oversight, which means those same underpaid, unmotivated soldiers are often the ones most willing to surrender the moment nobody is watching. So here is where this leaves us. Inequality rarely decides whether a war begins, but once the fighting starts, it quietly decides who gets sent to fight it, how long a country can keep sending them, and how loyal those soldiers actually are once the shooting starts. Russia did not stumble into this strategy by accident. It looked at its own poorest citizens and turned poverty into policy, which raises an uncomfortable question of its own. If poverty can be weaponized this efficiently once, what happens the next time a country needs an army it cannot otherwise afford?